time, we'll get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, our call with Nicole Giordano, who is the founder of Startup Fashion. Just a heads up, so everyone is on mute, but I will unmute everyone in the Q&A round. So I'll introduce myself briefly before we jump to the content and focus on Nicole. My name is Velma McCaffrey. I'm the founder of Work Bigger, which is a new online community and coaching program helping ambitious, high potential women find work they love so that they can make a difference in the world. Work Bigger also started as a blog and has now grown into a community with programming. So I'm extra excited to be facilitating this call and just being a part of it. I've known Nicole for a while now. I've been in DD for 2 years. So just super excited to dig in. And just again, some quick housekeeping. So we'll do a guided chat with Nicole for about 20 minutes. We'll do Q&A for 20 minutes, and then we'll do a lightning round of introduction. So I'll be keeping us on track with the time. But otherwise, I think we can go ahead and get started. So welcome, Nicole.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks. Hello, everyone. I see some faces that I know. Hi. Yeah. So I thought that I would talk about a tiny bit about my background. I don't want to spend too much time on it, and then kind of break down the 3 ways that we have used community to make money and create real business around that. And then just talk about each one of them, why we do them, how we do them. And then if you have questions that you want me to elaborate on any of those specific areas, I'd be happy to do that. So yeah, so my story begins with a blog. Startup Fashion was a blog first, and it was a blog for 3.5 years before we made any money from it. And I say that because I think it was a really important part of our success now, though I don't think it's necessary to wait that long. What was in my mind when I was creating this blog and building a community around this blog was not necessarily figuring out how to make money from them. And I think if you can kind of try to hold on to that mindset a little bit as you're trying to figure out how to, use community to actually make money, but not focus solely on that, you're definitely going to be in a better place. So for me, it was 3.5 years. And it was me sharing what I knew about the fashion industry. I should say Startup Fashion is a community for independent and emerging brands, helping them as they're working to build and grow their businesses. So it was a few years of sharing what I knew openly and honestly about the community. I'm sorry, about the industry of fashion in a way that was just really honest. And I think that is incredibly important. And it was also my take, which I think is a big, there's so much community and blogging and content and all of that right now. And figuring out what your take on it is incredibly important. So for me, it was, okay, there's this industry and it's been running a certain way for a long time, and I don't agree with it. I think there are a lot of ways that this industry is changing. And so I'm going to write a blog about how I think designers can be building businesses without feeling like they have to follow that traditional path. And so that was my unique spin on something and the foundation for what we have today, though at the time I didn't quite know that. And so we had this blog where we weren't making any money with it. We were just consistently posting to it and thoughtfully posting to it. And from there, over time, it became obvious that we had this community of readers, and they were so anxious and hungry for more information. And it was kind of a natural next step to introduce what was our first revenue stream, which was membership community. So we share a lot of really helpful information on our blog, but that's a lot of tips and kind of general tactics. And we kind of positioned it like, but if you're ready to progress from there, if you're ready for more hands-on, step-by-step guidance, if you're ready to connect with other people who are going through exactly the same thing as you are, then you can join the community, and it's the next step. And so we had this thing that didn't make any money, and the first thing to do was to kind of up-level that and figure out what can we offer them beyond what they're getting on the blog without taking away anything that they have been used to getting. So you can't like give away a bunch of stuff for free and then decide you're going to charge for some component and like take things away from what you were getting for giving for free. That's a really important part of why it works. So they don't feel gypped, they feel like pumped, right? Like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing, not like, oh, I'm so used to that, what happened? So we launched this community. With that said, it took us some time to figure out exactly what this community was going to look like, but it's successful. And the things that we've been doing to make it successful and to keep making money and have a really strong retention rate and all of that are the following. So we keep our membership community closed most of the time. So we only open twice a year for 1 week at a time. And that does two things. One, from a marketing perspective, it creates a sense of urgency. It's true urgency because we really, we don't just let anybody in at any time. But it also enabled me to really be present in that community. So the thing about making money or building a business around community is that one of the things I see happen too often with communities that don't work is once you get them, once they're paying, you sort of like disappear a little. And it's not like it happens with any like malice, like, oh, yay, I got them and I'm done. It's more like you have so much to do in your business and so much going on that it's kind of like you think it's a little bit on autopilot, and it's really not. And so what being open once or twice a year does is enables me to remain present. And I will say that the biggest piece of feedback I get from our members in terms of what they love is how involved I am. Not because it's me in particular, but because they got to know me, they became a member, and they feel like they still have access to me. They can ask me questions and I answer. And so if you're looking to build a community that is willing to pay you, being there and being present and making them or showing them that you're here for them is incredibly important. And if we were open all of the time, that would make it really difficult. It did make it really difficult because in the beginning we were open all of the time. So what else went into membership to make it successful? We find that a balance of connection and content is incredibly important. So our members, yes, they're connected to each other and they really love this sort of peer mentorship. But we also reinforce that with fresh, new content only for them every month. And so that's really important because it gives them something tangible to feel like, okay, am I getting something out of being a part of this? And maybe 50% of them will, every time they get charged every month, will say, you know what? Having these people here to talk to is definitely worth it. And, they'll keep paying. The other 50% will forget because maybe like they haven't actually needed help in maybe 2 months. They haven't posted in 2 months or something. And so they forget. So giving them other reasons to continue to pay you is important. So finding that balance between community and actual content, whatever that content looks like for your community, we have found to be incredibly, incredibly helpful. Something tangible is important. What else? We also regularly find ways to spotlight the people who are part of our community. So making sure that they feel not just special, but like an important part of the community. So thanking them when they answer something, that someone else posts, recognizing them as being such an important component of what you're doing, which is absolutely accurate, because if they're not active and excited to be there and giving as much as they're taking and all of that fun stuff that I know all of you understand because you're part of Dreamers and Doers, if that has to be a a part of it, or it's just not going to work. And so the way to kind of get that going is to encourage that. And I mean, like I said, you can see it in Dreamers and Doers when Geisha just like swoops in and says, you know, oh my gosh, thank you for being so dreamy, right? Like that's her favorite thing. That's important. It's important to recognize that. Especially like, I know that for me, for my community, and I don't know where all of your businesses are and who your community is, but my community is a lot of startups who weren't necessarily entrepreneurial before they decided to go out and do this. And they're very creative. They're all designers, or they've become designers. But the point being that they don't necessarily have a history of working in corporate environments or working with other people a lot. So it's nice to be able to show them how this sort of dynamic works, like show by example, and it catches on. So okay, so that is community membership. Some of the things that we have seen and done to really help it thrive. And that's the first way we make money. The second way we make money is through an e-commerce shop. And this is, we take some of the tools and the guides and the templates that we give our members for free, and we offer them a la carte, some of them a la carte in an e-commerce shop. And it's really important, if you're going to do this, not to compete with yourself. So we really, our e-commerce kind of incentivizes membership. So sure, we do really well. We do well with e-commerce and we make money and people buy stuff from it. But what we often see happening is somebody buys a template and then they're like, oh, that was great and helpful. And then they're like coming back to buy another template. And then they realize, you know, I could also just join and then I would have all of these templates and a whole bunch more. And so we don't give them access to everything via e-commerce, and we don't price it so that it makes sense to buy a bunch of stuff and not become a member. We kind of use it in a way to incentivize. The other great thing about e-commerce is that a lot of it is on autopilot. Now, I will share the caveat that we probably could put a lot more time and energy into our e-commerce than we do, but we make several $1,000s a month using in our e-commerce without a ton of work. So we have a lot of like sales funnel emails set up. We use the tool Meet Edgar to like repost a lot of like promotions for our e-commerce, so that every now and then we add some fresh tools, or we change something up, or we update something that we want to, you know, just refresh. But it's a really nice way to have just some regular income and not have to think a ton about that. So we have found that was a really smart addition to our revenue. And when we have a bigger team and when we have more time, we may put more thought and energy into that. But right now, it just kind of makes us money while we're focusing on our other things. Then the third way we make money, our third revenue stream, is through sponsorships. So what we did was, when we launched the membership community, we never stopped treating our blog as a really important part of our business. And I think that it can happen a lot because there's so much to do, and it's hard to necessarily see how the blog is going to increase your revenue. But we knew that we were building a community, or had built a community, of a very niche sector, that there were companies, events, just industry people wanted to get in front of, because this is the next generation of the fashion industry. These are the people who are coming up, and there are trade shows and all kinds of businesses that want that next generation of designers to be thinking about their business. So we decided to take that on. But we're very, very careful, because what I see often is people realize they have a community that can make them money, and then they just start taking on sponsors without much thought, and that's not really a good thing to do. So a little bit about how we work with sponsors. So we're very selective. I have to be honest, there was a time when I was like, I've got to go after more sponsors, like I've got to go after this. But as we spent more time working on our business, they just started coming to us, which is an amazing thing to happen. But when they come to us, I am very specific. I want to know how they're serving this industry or this niche in the industry. I want to talk to someone, get a feel for like what they're out to do, what matters to them, just to make sure there's some real like just understanding. And it's not it's a business. I get it. They want to access your community because ultimately they hope to make that community customers or attendees or whatever it is. But there's a good way to do it and a not good way. And it's all based on my gut. So I have those conversations. The other thing we do is all content is written by me when it comes to sponsors. So it remains in the startup fashion voice. I don't like just accept a press release and like find a way to repurpose it. Our content for sponsors is very focused on an issue that our community faces, our readers face. I spend several hundred words talking about that. And then it's not until, halfway through the blog post am I introducing our sponsor as a solution or one solution to this issue. So a really great way to bring on sponsors without losing your readership or without making it feel icky is to make sure that you're thinking about the sponsors that way and that everything still remains about your readers and that your sponsor is something really and truly helpful for your readers around a certain issue. So we customize all campaigns. It's really like on a case-by-case basis as opposed to like, oh, be a sponsor, here's a package, for whatever, $3,000, I'll put a sponsored post up. It has to be more thoughtful than that. So those are the 3 different ways we make money with a kind of like a snapshot of how they each work and what we do. But I am happy to delve into more on one topic, share more about anything. So I hope that was like a good overview.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I took so many notes and I have a couple of questions before we dive into the Q&A with everyone else. But my first question is, so going back to your blog when you got started, you said that you were consistently posting. Can you define what consistently posting meant for you?
Yep, it was 3 to 4 times a week on the same days so that people could expect it. And it was, I would say 95% of the time it was consistent in terms of like the level of information that we were sharing. I mean, everybody every now and then throws up a post. It's good, but it's not your best, and don't like beat yourself up about it. But they were all like thoughtful. And over time they've gotten longer and more in depth, but it was 3 to 4 times a week and still like solid content, not 3 to 4 times a week with like a couple of paragraphs of vague tips.
Mm-hmm. And were those all written by you, or did you bring people on to also write content for you?
At first, they were all written by me, except I should say I had, in the very, very beginning, I had a college student who was going to school for textiles. And so she would write cool articles about interesting textile stuff because she enjoyed doing it. So at first, it was just me. Then I started having experts in other areas. Like Sarah Weinreb is one of the people listening, and she contributed to our blog. Lauren Tanaka. So it's like having people who understood areas that I don't, because you're going to hit a point whoever your audience is, where it's like, so much about your industry, but you're not an expert in everything, and you shouldn't try to be. So the best way to serve your audience is to build relationships with others who can dive deep into a topic that you kind of know about, but not enough to give them what they need. So we got to a point where we had that. But I will say, a part of that is like we had to have our blog to a certain point where it's like, well, we had thousands and thousands of readers in order to get people to want to contribute, because we're all busy and we all have things going on. And so other people who are going to contribute to your blog want to know that they're going to be reaching people. So early on, it probably will be more difficult to get people. And so early on, it's often just you, and it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. And I have one more follow-up question to that. As far as making sure that the blog stayed in your voice as you were bringing people on, what did you do to ensure that?
I was the editor. So it was, well, two things. One, it was kind of like, I've either met this person before or they shared a blog post that they had already written. So I kind of had an idea that they understood our voice because theirs was similar. And so it was like, it didn't have to be exactly my voice, but it had to fall under, casual, conversational, laid back, because those are the things that describe our voice. Then once the contributor sends the article, I can go in, or I would go in and maybe add something like a word or two that in the editing process that's a bit startup fashion-y without like compromising the content that was sent, just to add a little bit of our voice. But starting with people that understand or have similar qualities in their voice is really important.
Okay, awesome. Another question I have is, when you launched membership for the first time, can you talk through what that process was like and what challenges you faced? And then secondly, how did you know that that was the right model for you?
Okay, so when we launched it, we had no idea what we were doing. And so it was a kind of situation where I'm lucky to have a partner in life and in startup fashion who is the tech side. So he built this for me. It was like, I have this idea. I think this can work. I don't know how to build it, and I don't want to spend a ton of money figuring it out. So he built something that was functional, but man, it was ugly, because we're not, neither one of us was a web designer or anything, but we didn't let it stop us. We knew that we were just going to put it out there. We charged 50% of what we knew it was worth for those we brought in 10 designers who I already knew to just be free members and to give us feedback. Then once we had that feedback and implemented some of their feedback, we opened it up. We sent emails to our email list, kind of posted on social media, charging 50% of what we were ultimately going to have it at. Knowing that the content and the information was great, but it wasn't very beautiful to look at, and we didn't know what the experience would be. So we wanted to, and also our message was really clear. Like, we just launched this and we want you to be a part of it and blah, blah, blah. And so people came on. The reason I knew it was what we should do is because even though it was ugly, and even though it was like PowerPoint slides to give information instead of beautifully designed PDFs, people were staying and people were asking for more, and like, oh, this was great. Could you also give us this, and that, and the other thing? And you have to take all of that, like, as it comes and create a little document with all of the suggestions. You can't make yourself crazy and try to do everything. But even with I think we had 25 designers in there, even with just those amount, I don't even know if it was that many. It could have been 15, 16, something like that. I can't remember, to be honest. But they were eating it up, and they wanted it. And so we knew that we just had to keep working on it. And we knew that we were going to lose some people as we were working to make it better. And that's okay. It's just part of it, because if you wait until it's perfect in hopes of not losing people, then you're going to be waiting forever. So, cause it's never going to be perfect. So, so we just put it out there, and we knew, because so many of them wanted more. And then, So, and what was the other part of your question?
How did you know that that was the right model?
Okay. So the model, I think I knew our audience really well, and I knew that they were startup business owners who did not have a ton of capital because they're independent. They're also of an industry where you're expected to know everything. Like fashion designer, it's you have to know how to design beautiful clothes. You have to know how to get them made, the whole world of production. You have to know how to sell them. You have to know how to market them. You have to know how to build a beautiful website, so much. And a lot of businesses, you have to know a lot or you're expected to know a lot. But with fashion, there's this added component of production, and it's scary and time consuming. And I knew that they could not afford consultants for every area of the business, or they couldn't afford to hire someone to handle every area. I also knew that they were coming to me constantly asking, well, do you do consulting work? And I did do consulting work for a little while. I didn't want to continue to do it, but I also knew that they needed more than just my expertise in like one area. It's like you are starting a business in a really crazy industry. So I knew a lot about them, and I knew that this model would enable me to help a lot of them at one time rather than one-on-one, and it would enable them to help one another because they're all dealing with the same stuff and at different times, and it could be done at a price that they could afford. So I knew it was the right model because I knew enough about them and their needs, which is incredibly important, and something that, because I had that blog for so long and I was getting emails and from them and comments on the blog, I had learned. So, and I was also a part of that industry. I was a designer myself, so I had a basic understanding of all of the crap that you have to do in that industry. So,
yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. That's a perfect answer. You knew enough about them and their needs to make that decision. So super, super key. I would love to open it up to everyone else now to see if they have questions, but I'm wondering, can you unmute yourselves, or do I have to unmute everyone, just the way this is set up? I don't think you can.
We can unmute. I unmute myself.
Awesome. Okay. Great.
I actually have to hop off the call. I'm at work, but thank you guys so much. This is Marsha. Thank you so much for all of the information.
Thanks, Marsha.
Yeah,
no
thanks,
problem.
Marsha.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have any questions that they want to jump in with? I have more questions, but instead of me continuing to ask, I'd love to open it up to you guys.
I'm curious, I guess one step back before monetizing is like getting the consistent traffic that you would need to monetize for your blog. So for Envy, we have a blog, and the people who read it are like super into it, but it's not a lot of them. And I just feel like maybe, I know Startup Fashion started a while ago, so maybe the early part of it also was probably helpful now that the market is so saturated with everything. So I'm just curious, tips on like finding your audience, especially when there's so much content out there, and how you kind of built your audience to be, those niche people that eventually were able to convert to membership.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of building the audience, a couple of things. I will say it took time, and we kind of had some patience with that as we were working to figure out like, well, how am I going to actually make this a business? But what I found worked really well for us is we did a lot of just sort of testing with content. So and worked on it that way. So what I can say in terms of Startup Fashion, what we found was that really helpful, like step-by-step or like tips articles were really important and helpful, but they weren't enough. And so what we started doing, and what really started to amp up our audience, is I started getting really personal on the blog in terms of like every Friday I share a musing, and that is just me writing about the challenges I face, about what it's like to be an entrepreneur, that kind of stuff. And we found that having that content paired with the step-by-steps and the tips was really starting to build a relationship and getting people to talk about our blog more. So when you're talking about like, well, how do I build up this audience in a saturated area? It's like really zeroing in on your brand and what it is you have to offer that's special in terms of your point of view and your voice, and like how you can talk to them differently. I have to say, like, I think I love what you do with you make those like books, those like guides about your blog posts that have like, it's very lifestyle-y, and I've shared that with people and said like, this is a really beautiful way as a brand to do this, and I think you're up to a really good start with that. So for us it was like that. We also were always in the back end, like of, using Google Analytics, seeing which keywords we should be using, seeing what was driving a lot of traffic and using that more. We did a complete like SEO like overhaul, made sure everything was the way it should be. What else did we do? We use email and we use it consistently, and that really helped with growing the blog readership. I'm trying to think of what else we did. It's been a while. But I think the biggest thing was really the reason why I get emails regularly from people who are reading the blog and they're thanking me for it, which is flattering and amazing. But the reason I'm saying it is because clearly the way I'm talking to them and is really resonating, and they're saying there's nothing like this out there. Nobody's sharing the way you're sharing. So what is it you can do to get that reaction from your audience? What do you know about them that could tug at those emotional, those heartstrings? Because I think that is what is going to help you when there's all of this content out there.
Can I ask a question following up on that? What you said that you used email a lot. What do you mean by that?
So
you captured them and then remarketed to them or resent to them? Or?
Yeah, so we capture them, and then when every Sunday evening we send out an email where the full email is the email is the full musing that I wrote from Friday. I don't make them click through to the website to read that one. So they read this email and they read down, and they're like, it's like emotional, and it really connects with them. And then there's one more article underneath of it, and it's a picture and a little blurb with a read more. And that might be not, and that's not a musing. It's more of like a tips or whatever. So they read this, there's like an emotional reaction, and then it's like, oh, do you need some help with this? And then that drives them. And so we see so much uptick. I mean, we send these emails every Sunday, same format, and those have really helped with just getting people on the blog too. Because I think one of the things people do is they send out emails and everything is like, click here to read more, click here to read more. And that's fine. It's one way to get people to go to your website. But I think that the trust and the relationship of sharing that whole blog post with them, and like they felt like they got something in the email, it means they're opening those emails because they're excited to read that whole thing. And then they're still clicking through to read more. And so I think it's like a psychological thing.
Yeah, I like that too. Also, I think it helps promote people forwarding it to their friends if they don't have to click through. So they have all of the value within that one email. That's interesting. Thanks.
Sure.
And I have a follow-up question to that. And you don't have to share specifics, but wondering what are some success metrics as far as open rates and click-through rates that we can track and say, okay, we're on the right track here.
Yeah, I can tell you what ours are. So our open rate is averages about 50%, and then our click-through rate is maybe 10%-ish. I haven't looked at it in a little while, but I think that kind of falls in the, I mean, I know people whose open rate, they feel good about like a 5% open rate or 10% open rate. I'm not really an expert on that part, but I feel like when I talk to people, other people, they tend to say that in terms of like, oh, we have an open rate of like 14% or 12% or something. And I feel really excited that like 50% of the people who get our emails, open them. And it's also, I would say it's remained pretty consistent even as our email list has grown. So we're at around 19,000 emails right now, and that's pretty solid. I mean, I know people who have, hundreds of thousands, but that feels good. And as we continue to grow, we're still seeing that open rate. So that's where I am, but.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I would say that's way above average just from what I've heard. So.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Who else? Does anyone want to jump in with any other questions?
I have a question. Hey, Nicole.
Hi, Lauren.
So if you were to like start from the, all over again, would you recommend going in the order of monetizing in the sense of, you know, you did number 1, membership, number 2, e-commerce, number 3, sponsorships. Just because I know that Startup Fashion, it was, you know, it was a very organic process. It was something that you kind of just like, you know, it just happened organically. So, you know, obviously, you know, a little bit about, you know, what I do in my business. So I'm just wondering if you would recommend that route also for someone just starting out.
I think that I would do it the same way, mainly because I felt like with membership, it's like my audience first, right? And I know that that is the most valuable thing I could offer them, was this membership, this community, this place to get answers. So I think I would follow that same path. I would, though, if I had if my blog was up and it was going, and I wouldn't necessarily like hold off on something like sponsorship. If someone came to me, I would be like, okay, let's talk. But I think all of those things, I would still do all 3 of them, and I would probably still do them in the order that I've done them. Yeah, I think so. I think that I don't know that I would wait 3.5 years to have like figured out the first thing I wanted to do, but it was a while ago, and membership communities were like not a thing really yet. And so now today, if I was just starting today, I might be like, okay, I'm going to do a membership and I'm going to get started sooner than later, but still taking time to learn about them and talk to them before launching anything, just not as much time.
Gotcha. Actually, a follow-up question on the sponsorship. So how long did you wait? Like, you know, you said like you wouldn't wait necessarily for sponsorships, but, you know, keeping with like, I don't know, just with integrity of, you know, having enough readership, what would you say would be a good target?
Honestly, I think that, I don't know if it's like, are you asking like what a sponsor wants to see? Or are you asking like internally, like your gut, like when you feel ready to take on sponsors?
Yeah, because, you know, you hear like different things like, oh, well, you need to have like X amount of page views or X amount of readers and things like that. So like, what would you say would be a good, you know?
I see. So I don't listen to most of that stuff because I think it depends. I will say this. If you're talking about a consumer-based, like a B2C company, which I know you're not, but I'll just quickly say, then you do need to pay attention to things like those hitting some of those bigger numbers, because they're so used to, sponsors are so used to like, oh, well, this lifestyle blog has, you know, 1 million people looking every month. In our world of the B2B, especially B2B within fashion, we were not, like, we didn't have 1 million people looking at our blog, but what we had was a very niche audience who was who we were doing a good job of connecting with. And so for us, it was when we were talking to, if a sponsor would come to us and say, or when we started sponsorship and they came to us and they said, okay, well, what are your numbers? We started with sponsorships, and, you know, we had there were a few thousand people on our email list and things like that, but our audience was so niche and so targeted that they were okay with that. And we were also one of the few blogs out there talking to this audience. So I don't know that I would tie it in necessarily to like the numbers, but focus when you're talking to sponsors, to potential sponsors, on the relationship that you have with the people who are who you know, who are part of your audience. So okay, maybe we only have 2,000 people on our email list, but we have a 50% open rate, and that tells you something about how hungry our audience is. And so finding ways to talk about that as opposed to the numbers with sponsors early on, we found really helpful.
Gotcha. Awesome.
So we have time, I would say, for 1 or 2 more questions, and then we should jump into the lightning round of intros.
Hi, this is Swarna, and I have a question. I have been exploring something very similar. Audiences, my audience would be startup founders as well, in the beauty industry, and they have very similar problems that you described, just like fashion designers. And but the question I have is more tactical. So when forming a community can be done on many platforms, which one would you recommend today versus what you started on whenever you started on? Because things have changed since then, I'm assuming. And I missed the first part of your conversation, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. So we are still on the same platform that we started with, though it wouldn't be the one I would recommend. So we are on a platform called Social Engine, and it's fine, but it's a little bit clunky. And so in terms of what people are using now, I have heard that Buddy Press, I think, is supposed to be one that a lot of people really like. It extends nicely from a WordPress site, and people have, and a lot of like the same drag and drop plugin, you can build it out the way you can build out a WordPress blog. It can grow with you. I have heard Buddy Press is a good one. So I would look into that, and then maybe Google like competitors of Buddy Press, only because we're not really going to switch our platform. So I haven't been up on what the latest ones are. So check out Buddy Press and then see, do some compare and contrast on others that are similar. I'm sure there are plenty of articles out there. And don't do Social Engine.
Thank you.
Sure.
Kristen, I think you also had a question.
Yeah, so how do you determine like perhaps a tiered pricing when it comes to sponsorship, like for, maybe a sponsorship on a blog post versus an email marketing campaign or something? Do you have a variation in pricing that you work with sponsorships for?
Yeah, so early on, we just kind of sat down and made our own internal like price list. It wasn't something we showed them, but it was just like, okay, what would we charge for this based on, just our numbers, and then, understanding that we have this relationship. I did a little bit of research, like trying to find out what others charge, which this was years ago, and that wasn't exactly an easy thing to do, but we came up with our own little internal list. It does vary depending on what they want to do, and we mix and match things, and then we just try to remain consistent. So it's like, I'm not going to be, when a big company comes to us, and then a smaller mid-size comes, I'm not going to charge the bigger company more than I would charge them. So I don't have any real practical advice, I'm sorry, on like figuring out exactly what you should charge, but having it yourself so that you can reference it makes it kind of easier when you're working on a custom package. I will also say this, be flexible in terms of like what you might want to offer. So something that we've started to do more of is that we get smaller companies come to us and say, we'd love to collaborate, which is the famous word. And then I say, okay, well, this is how we work with partners. And they're just like, oh, okay, well, we don't really have a budget, but is there any way we can like work together? And usually they don't have the numbers that we do. And so it wouldn't be a win-win. So what we've started doing is saying like, okay, so we have our larger audience, which people pay to access. But we also have our smaller membership community. And one of the things that we would love is if you would be willing to offer our members some sort of perk or discount or incentive to whatever it is they do, whether it's a product or a service. And that way it's like they're not able to reach our entire global, many thousands of people, but they are able to reach our smaller membership community. They're starting to like, connect there, and it becomes a win for my community. So it's not always about how could Startup Fashion make money, but can we form this partnership with someone who clearly doesn't have the budget, who can bring something to our members? And that helps with membership, because then it's like, oh my goodness, being a part of Startup Fashion, I get all of these awesome perks too. And so that helps build that revenue stream. So it does ultimately come back to you. So thinking about things like that too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nicole. You're so awesome. Just my biggest takeaway, honestly, from this whole call so far has been, I took a bunch of notes for personal reasons because I feel like I learned so much, but really audience first and leading with authenticity and focusing on connection. And I think once you establish that, that's the foundation that you need to build a successful business. And I think that's also why Dreamers and Doers is so successful as well. So
I agree.
yeah, thank you. So I would love to jump into introductions since we have about 10 minutes left, and I think there are 12 of us total. Nicole and I already did our intro, so would love to do just a lightning round of intros, DD style. So, you know, share a little bit about yourself, and then an ask and an offer, and yeah, and then I think that'll conclude our call.